Welcome to another episode of Wildcat Career Chat. I am David Bennett, the engineering teacher here at Central High School. I have today with me Mr. Joe Furr. Thanks for coming.
No problem.
So tell me, Mr. Joe Furr, what's your career? What's your title? What do you do?
So I'm a business owner. I started my own company 2 years ago, focusing on, there were three original things I was going to niche down into. The primary one and the one that I stuck with is drone services and the engineering aspect, kind of leaning into surveying and mapping and 3D scanning using drones.
Cool. You said you had some other ideas that you were also working on though, as well as the drone services.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Go ahead.
yeah. So the three main ideas. I graduated in 2022 in mechanical engineering from LSU, and so I worked for a year in forensic engineering, also known as like accident investigating. So basically, car crash happens, and if one or both of the parties, if somebody's thinking of suing the other one, or the other one's worried about getting sued for whatever happened in the accident, they'll get an attorney involved, and then the attorney would hire the firm that I worked for. And the firm that I worked for would use drones to 3D scan and survey the layout of where the accident took place. And then there was also various 3D scanners to scan the vehicles that were involved. You can measure the crush and all that kind of stuff. So I worked there for a year, and I realized while getting to know the drone and the different details of using it for that 3D scan, I realized that there's a lot of other uses for it other than just what we were doing. And I'd always wanted to start my own company and do my own thing. And so did my research, figured, okay, now's a good time. So after only a year there, jumped and went into my own thing. Also had a lot of 3D printing experience. So the three ideas, to bring it back to the three ideas. Three ideas were: one, drone services in engineering, 3D scanning type, and in any way that the people could have me,
Okay.
Any application for it. And then the second idea was 3D printing as a service, 3D printing and 3D modeling as a service. So someone, for instance, I had this lady come, there's a specific engagement ring from 100 years ago, and she had lost it. And working from her memory and some rough sketches, I was able to 3D model that ring for her. And so that was one of those services, and 3D print it for. And then the other one was 3D printing my own products. I'd been working on some since even during school at LSU in mechanical engineering. I was working on some, and so kind of releasing those.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. That's really cool.
So all that trying to do under the same business name and just feeling whatever worked.
And you said that the drone services thing has really taken off for
Correct.
you. So you said surveying and stuff like that. So what kind of stuff are you surveying?
My main clients are on the Amite River. There's a lot of gravel deposits. You get, say, about a half a mile away from the river, and you dig through 15, 20 feet of dirt. And then there's a whole bunch of gravel there, gravel and sand. And gravel and sand is what's used in concrete. And so there's this whole industry that I had no idea about. But basically they dig these ponds. They put a pump that sucks up the gravel, sand, and water from the bottom of the pond. They run it through a processing plant. They separate it into sand, and there's different kind of rocks. They'll strain out different sizes, and they'll separate those into different piles, and then they sell those piles off. And so I just, again, any application of the same technology, of the same techniques. I approached the different plants, and several of them wanted me to come once a month and 3D scan their stockpiles, because they're these huge, like 20, 30 foot tall piles, and they don't know exactly how much is in them.
Okay.
And so this scan, I'd calculate the volume. You can calculate the cubic yards of how much is in each pile. And then using a couple of different techniques, there's a rule of thumb, and then there's a way of measuring it, but you can calculate the tons or the amount of weight in the pile. And so those are my favorite clients. I have my wife make them cookies, and like I'll bring them smoothies every now and then.
As a business owner, you want a regular
Yes.
stream of income, and so
Yes.
having someone that says come once a month
Come once a month.
is the best kind of customer you can have, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome.
So those are my favorites. That's my main, my bread and butter. It's hard to get those clients, and but they're really fun to keep. They like me, I like them.
Yeah.
So that's the main application. But there's a few others. Like I said, it's really anything that same skill set can be hired to do.
Okay. Well, that's really, really cool. I wouldn't have thought of using drones for 3D scans, but
Yep.
that makes perfect sense. You can drive around, you can see it from every angle,
Mm-hmm.
map it out, and
Yep.
then using, I assume, some computer software. You're using that ability to help them keep their inventory.
Correct.
That's really cool. So, you said your degree was in mechanical engineering.
Correct.
What did you learn in college that helped you develop these skills or anything like that?
Yeah. So at least with 3D scanning, that was more so developed outside, mainly within forensics. The math behind 3D scanning, someone with a mechanical engineering degree, it's easier to understand that. You could get there with some physics and different kinds of like advanced geometry and trig. But yeah, so that made it easier to learn that side. As far as drones in general, my senior design project at LSU, your final year there in that degree, you go through a 1-year program of a different project. There's various kinds, but basically you design a product from the bottom up, and then you develop the prototype. And the project that I was selected for was a 3D printed drone. And so I learned a lot about drones, and I already knew a lot about 3D printing, but I refined a lot of my 3D printing knowledge there.
Yeah.
So,
well, that probably made you a bit of a shoo-in for the forensic job that you had right out of college, right?
exactly. Yeah.
So they were like, this guy already knows about drones. I feel like these senior design projects at LSU really kind of give you a leg in to a location or a future job, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. So let's talk about like what does a day-to-day what does a typical day feel like for you? Do you wake up and you go to the office? Do you have an office?
Yeah.
Or what's a day look like?
So because I'm a one-man show, I don't think I said that, but
Okay.
I'm a one-man show. It's just me.
So no employees.
So no employees.
You are the business.
Yeah, at moments I've come to the cusp of being beyond what I can do and have considered hiring somebody, but just never bit the bullet and did it. So I've just maintained me.
Right.
And in the future, as I get older and more experience, I'll do that at some point. So because it's just me, there's a lot of things that a business owner has to do, and so every day is different. In general, my week starts with on Monday. I wake up, I go straight to my office. It's a spare bedroom in our house with all my drones and my 3D printers and everything. And I check online. There's different job boards that'll sometimes have some work. So I check those job boards. I'll check if there's any kind of tax filings I need to do or just kind of general office work. Some days I will spend the entire day in the office. And so a lot of that, like for instance, recently I released a product on a 3D printed rocket launcher for the airsoft industry. Okay. It uses a CO2 cartridge, those 12-gram CO2 cartridges.
Yeah, paintball guns used to use them.
Yeah. So I invented a rocket that builds around that, and rocket's reusable, and the cartridges, you do it.
Unscrew them out.
Yeah, you unscrew them out, and then the launcher is kind of around that, and it's got it's spring loaded. cock it into place, pull the trigger. There's a nail that goes and punctures the cartridge, and the rocket flies off.
So you're 3D printing rocket launchers. So are you planning to sell the design of this invention?
So some earlier versions of it, I did sell the design online, but there's really not enough money in it to make it worthwhile.
Okay.
And so after spending substantially more time in research and developing and making a much more professional product that someone in airsoft could actually use, highly functional, more durable, and the range got better. But the earlier version I released, where you could just pay like $5 online and you could download the file and print it yourself. I mean, there's been less than 100 people that have bought it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now I've just released a version that somebody could buy outright, and I just released it, so no sales yet, a lot of interest. But that intellectual property, I don't want anybody, those STL files, I don't want anybody getting their hands on the STL file, even though it's copyrighted and I would have a legal right to, sue somebody or whatever.
Right.
Lawsuits don't go over cross borders. If some Chinese company gets the STL, which they could for $5 from the site that I did, then they could copy my exact model. So after putting way more effort into the design, I no-go'd releasing that online. So I'm keeping it under lock and key.
Right. So that's an interesting issue with 3D printing. You've got all these your intellectual property, the invention that you made. You said you had a copyright on it. Do you have a patent as well, or is that something that you had to work on through? Or
a lot of people have encouraged me to get a patent, but at the end of the day, patents are U.S. based, and any Chinese manufacturer can copy your design outright. And I mean, maybe for big companies like Shell and Exxon, they could have some kind of legal standing with a whole team of lawyers, but little old one man, small business, it only takes one company to copy the design, and a patent doesn't protect you across borders, at least not across the U.S., to China.
Right. International borders.
International, yeah. I think U.S. patents hold up in Europe. So you can have legal standing there. I think so.
Okay.
But regardless, for me, it's an airsoft product. Most airsoft products are manufactured in China. And so it would be very easy for somebody over there to see the business use case and just copy the design.
Okay.
So I didn't bother with a patent, mainly because it wouldn't protect me anyways. But I did consider it, and a lot of people hold the design, shoot the thing, and say, you need to get a patent on this. But
yeah. So the reason is just like time and expenses, I guess, huh?
Time and expenses. And so I listened to a lot of interviews and read articles on it, and a lot of people say it's cool to say that you have a patent, and I could patent my thing. But that's kind of it. In the modern world where, manufacturing isn't based in the U.S. 100%, right, and you can have products manufactured overseas, it's not really worth it in the for the original intent of a U.S. patent. In a lot of ways, it's not worth it.
So your strategy for protecting your intellectual property is simply just don't let that data get released. Essentially,
don't let it get released, and one of the people that I think he made a specific kind of blender, and I listened to his story on patent versus no patent, and he said what he wished he would have done is just hammered on brand and make sure that his brand was at the forefront of everything. Because if someone's got an image and a picture, they've got your brand in mind. Your brand can be more valuable than anything, because all the cheap Chinese knockoffs are cheap knockoffs.
Right.
And even if they do function as well, people can't trust it so long as you're I think he was the first like shake blender, like portable blender, battery powered blender guy. And he said brand is where it's at.
Right.
And so if you're the first one to have something and you make it the best and you do a good job of marketing and and having your brand stick out, then that's that's the key.
Right, right. It's the Ziploc or the Kleenex where the name of the brand is
Yeah,
what people imagine is the name of the object. You
yeah,
know, a plastic sealed bag is called a Ziploc by most people
yeah,
because Ziploc has that brand loyalty or
exactly.
that brand recognition.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a great point. I haven't really talked to many people that have experienced the opportunity to get a patent. So it's interesting to hear from somebody on that. So that's really cool.
yeah,
So yeah, and it's interesting in the world that we live in now, where you can buy a 3D printer and print your own stuff when you're trying to be a an inventor or somebody like that that's got control over their invention that they
mm,
spend a lot of time on. Uh, how we can you have to be careful about not losing things like that.
yeah.
So, in your process of creating your rocket, I just kind of want to talk about the rocket because I
Yeah.
like rockets. In the process of creating it, what was your like engineering design process like? How did you like go through that process? How did you keep notes, and what kind of research did you have to do?
So it's it's a 4-year project, and for 2 of those years I was in school, and for 2 of them I wasn't, and for all of them I was full time doing something else other than the past year and a half. So different stages looked entirely differently. I got the idea whenever I was taking fluid mechanics at LSU, and as we were learning about, you know what choked flow is?
Mhm.
Oh,
I'm an electrical engineer. I didn't
okay,
take fluids, but
okay.
I have some engineering backgrounds.
Okay. Whenever you isentropically take a flow and bring it to where the speed is Mach 1, that's the speed of sound. Um, it's now at the point where uh, I guess maybe I should save on the details. But basically, we were learning about choked flow and how rocket engines work, and how you take the combustion and you bring it down, you throttle it to a narrow throat, and then you slowly expand that, and that's what you see at the bottom of the rocket is the big bell shape. And whenever they're teaching us about that, I was like, wait a second. And I went home and looked at my CO2 cartridges because I played
They're already kind
airsoft,
of shaped
and
that way.
that's exactly why they do it. If you look at the pressure on the inside and the diameter of that little throat, it's choked flow. It's right at the point of being about Mach 1. And a rocket engine chokes that flow, and then there's this magical thing that happens where whenever you uh, isentropically, which means like no the flow doesn't do anything weird. You don't like having something in the middle of it that messes it up, but like you do the slow bell curve, it increases your thrust
Okay.
dramatically. I think sometimes it can be like 7 or 10 times as much thrust as what you were originally getting before you did that whole process.
Okay.
Uh, Anywho, so I was like, oh wow, I could do that, and you could put a rocket on this thing, and that's great. And so I started researching into how to do that, and then I started trying to do the calculations on how much thrust, how much. There's a rocket equation. I think it's like force times delta T equals mass times delta V. So your thrust multiplied by the amount of time that you can provide that thrust is equal to the mass times the uh, the change in velocity. And so if you're in a rocket going straight up, you know you need more force than gravity, um, and your velocity starts at 0 because your rocket's just sitting there pointed
Right.
up, and your final velocity
Is
you
however fast it can
yeah, however
get
fast
up
it's
to.
going. And so I started with doing tests on the rocket launchers where I had or on the CO2 cartridges where I made a little test rig where you just pull a little lever action down that was activated by rubber bands, and it had a nail, and it would smack the nail, and the nail would pop the cartridge, and there was a contraption of a known mass that was run on stringers up to the ceiling. And so then the cartridge would shoot up to the ceiling, and we would measure the height. We had a slow-mo camera going that would measure the height um, that the object of a known mass got to, and then from that you can back out what your there's a specific word for it. It might be impulse.
Probably so.
Probably.
Yeah. So I used to teach physics. So,
Okay. Yeah.
So impulse is like how much force and time
Okay.
multiplied together.
Okay.
So you built yourself a prototype.
Yep.
Or
just a test rig.
A test rig to understand the calculations that you needed, just to understand the force required.
Yeah, or how much force you could get out of.
Yeah, how much force? Yeah, exactly. So you knew your constraint that you had on your engineer on your design was how much force can this thing apply,
Mm-hmm.
and based on that, I guess you started to design your rocket around what force was available.
Around, yeah, and yeah. So
cool.
Yeah, and it was interesting because before you design the rest of that bell curve, you need to know what's there at the throttled throat, and so we had to test with just the CO2 cartridge, and then had to back out what that mass flow rate is, and then later on figure out, okay, with that mass flow rate, and how big can you expand the flow to increase that thrust.
Cool. So, yeah. So that's really neat that you had you were learning a concept at school,
mm-hmm.
and you said, here's an application for it, and I don't think it's been used yet.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What were some other of your classes that you took in as a mechanical engineer at LSU that you enjoyed or you learned from?
Machine design 2 was by far my favorite. Mainly because it's one of the most traditional mechanical engineering classes. It's moving parts. There's a machine, gears and a mechanical arm over here, and if you put this amount of force on this arm and it's moving this quickly, then how does it affect the rest of the contraption? And it was really, really enjoyable. It was just kind of boots on the ground. Some of the classes, you don't see how it connects to the real world quite as clearly, and that one it was very cut and dry. It was really enjoyable.
That's cool. So were you actually getting to build or construct any things? Was there like a lab component to this class, or was it mostly theoretical?
That unfortunately was towards the end of the COVID time. So that class, it was only online, and but I've trying to think of how I've used the applications from that class. But at the very least, it's been really helpful. Even if I haven't run the same calculations since the course, the same concepts and principles have affected like everything.
Right. I mean, even you setting up that test rig for your rocket. I mean, there's examples of mechanics involved and the physics required to understand how to build all those little test rigs. So.
Yeah, and whenever you're working with a test rig like that, where it was boards and nails and rubber bands, it's like, okay, there's not a lot of friction there. I don't have a way to measure exactly how much friction this is in this little hinged piece, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot. And we're not able to puncture the CO2 cartridge enough. Well, let's just add more rubber bands.
Right.
So there's just that degree of how many calculations are needed to be run before a process can be started.
Right. How much rigor is involved or required for your thing.
Yeah.
That's cool. So you had your mechanical engineering degree, then you did your forensics, and then now you've got your own business. When you started your business, was there a lot of did you have to get a lot of capital to start it up, or were the drones something that you already had? Like, how does one go about starting a business like this?
Yeah. So, um, luckily, there are certain drones that are really high in capability and not horrible on cost. So I started with ones that weren't great at mapping. You could map with them, and you could get them used for about $500. And since that point, I've kind of worked my way up within the same branch of drones. So I would say I don't think I spent more than 3 grand to start the business, but I already had a really great computer at home to run all sorts of software. I already had a great setup. I had one 3D printer. I bought 3 more later on, but a lot of the equipment I already had, and that's what's great about a home office is that if you've got a decent setup at home or even a great setup, you're already set. The equipment's just you know
Yeah.
slides right over. So.
Okay. And as far as building your customer base, how did you get started? Building customers, finding people who wanted to you to work for them.
Man, it was a little bit of everything. There's some job boards online that make the process really easy, but they're taking a huge chunk out of what you can make. And
Okay.
so though, and plus those clients are really lowballing. Um, so some of my clients I got by going to the job board, accepting the not great pay, and then after the job with that client, being like, hey, you could just do this directly with me next time and get the same product. And those clients, so then you gain your middleman fee back,
Okay.
and that can often be very significant. So the middlemen are very good at pitting different drone pilots against each other and having just the most bottom tier price.
Okay.
So that was one way, is going to the different job boards that are out there, and just earning loyalty through those, through kind of taking a hit on the first job.
Yeah.
Other way is just cold calling. These The gravel pits that I do this for. It was just a friend of a friend might know somebody there, and then I'd call them up and be like, "Hey, so and so said I might should call you. Oh yeah, we love so and so. What you got? Well, I can, and I'll do the job for free. Well, one of them offered to do it for free at first, just to get my foot in the door and get my name out there. And the day that I was on my way, I was about to pull out of the driveway and go there. And they called me up and said, actually, we don't want the free thing. So it was only like a couple of piles instead of the
Mhm.
full thing. Could you just do the full thing tomorrow? Do the full, I was like, for, get paid. They didn't want the free sample. They wanted
Yeah.
the full thing.
Well,
So
the fact that you were offering may have probably got you through, right?
yeah, yeah. So that's been my best method so far, is doing the free thing up front.
Okay.
And then, it's hard to turn that down, even although some people do. So,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
but I'm by no means a business sales guru. So I wouldn't say that that I've got the best methods. The free sample has been successful, but yeah.
Yeah.
So that's been my main methods for drone work, customer acquisition.
There you go. Okay. And so, as far as maintaining those relationships with those customers, other than doing a good job,
Hmm.
uh, how about what other kind of soft skills do you need to have, like when you're working with them, as far as just like interpersonal relationships as a business owner?
Yeah, it's hard to qualify that. Um, in general, man, it's uh it's hard to qualify that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, do you feel like there were any experiences maybe in college or something like that that helped you build those like interpersonal skills, or some clubs or anything like that that you were in? Uh, that helped prepare you for
For
those
that,
sorts?
those
Yeah, for
interactions.
that aspect of things.
I don't know. I know that one of the weak points of a regular school environment, there's a lot of positives to it, is that you spend a lot of time with peers, and the real world, it's like you're not with peers 99% of the time.
Right.
Uh, Most of the time, the most important person in your vicinity is much older than you, and even then, you're always going to be there's the full age range in any company. There's a full age range,
Yeah.
and so being comfortable with peers uh, is good because when there's someone of a similar age, you know how to interact. Um, but yeah, I'm sorry, I'm struggling to think of
No, it's okay.
what specifics.
Yeah, but like so what you're saying though is that there's the typical high school or college career, you're working, even in your engineering design senior project, you probably worked with your peers.
Yeah,
But there's an importance to being able to work with other types of personalities,
yeah,
and that's something that you're running into now that you're out in the business world.
yeah,
That you maybe that's maybe something that we as educators need to think about, trying to find ways to help you guys who are going out, getting ready to go out into the world. Uh, we need to maybe think of a way to start introducing you to other types of people besides just your peers.
yeah.
You um, I know, speaking to other engineers or other people, they talk about how uh, when you work with people who don't have the same degree as you or whatever,
Hmm.
you have to be able to communicate
Yeah.
in a on the same level as somebody else.
Mhm.
Almost like code switching. You
Yeah.
swap your way of speaking depending on your audience.
Yeah.
Is that something you're experiencing a little bit in your field?
Yeah. Well, whenever I've worked for a company where there's a lot of interaction between employees, that was totally the case. Whenever you're on a solo, mission, and it's just you as a business owner, I mean, most of my interactions are with my wife and kids. So,
Oh, that's nice.
so it's really great. I love it. I love it. I wouldn't trade it um, for anything,
Yeah.
almost anything.
Okay.
Uh, um, so so that's absolutely the case. And as soon as I hire somebody with a different specialty than mine, um, that'll be the case again. Is switching languages.
Yeah.
Um, and whenever I'm talking to clients, there's that big divide. But the difference is I don't get regular interaction with them that is low intensity. Whenever I'm with a client, I have to be on my best, on my top. I should have already been speaking their language, and so
Right.
a lot of that for instance, I'll listen to podcasts from their industry before I go and
Well,
speak to
that's a
them,
great tip.
especially. Yeah. So there's a couple of mining or gravel pit podcasts, and I'll listen to those before I'm getting ready to talk to my mining clients. Just kind of get their vocabulary on my tongue. I might read some articles or just dive into something in that area of the world and get the vocabulary fresh on my mind. Um, but for them, there's not a regular interaction, regular meaning weekly,
Yeah.
or especially daily, where I'm speaking to them verbally. A lot of the reason they love me and keep wanting me to come back is that I'm trouble free. I need very little communication from them. The people who I'm doing valuable things for are very busy. They're business owners and managers of the plant, and there's a lot that goes on with that.
Yeah.
And so, one of their favorite qualities about paying me to do the work is that there is very limited communication that needs to take place because
Right.
uh, but that's the downside, like we were talking about, is now I'm isolated and I'm not talking to their now I'm not speaking their language
Right.
regularly.
Yeah, the tip though about looking into articles or podcasts, that's a great tip. I hadn't ever considered that. If you're moving into a new industry or talking to somebody that is kind of from their own little microcosm, their own little world, they're gonna have some terms that they're gonna say, and you're gonna be like, I don't know what that term is, you
Yeah.
know. And so that's a great way to pick those that language up. I
Yeah.
had never thought about that before.
Yeah.
So great tip there. As far as your area of expertise in the drone world, is there uh, podcasts or societies or magazines or something that you're interested in and or participate in that you would like to promote or tell a student that's interested in drone technology to check out?
Yeah, yeah, sure. The drone U, the drone, and then the letter U is my favorite go to. There are several other podcasts that I listen to. Most of them, it is some sort of education agency or business, and then they have the podcast as like a sales funnel to get you eventually into buying their course, and the courses are good. So, but those are the podcasts I listen to. But to be honest, a lot of the drone people are very good at bringing a lot of people into the industry, and so a lot of segments of the drone industry are very crowded. So
Okay.
I would actually kind of warn any students that if they are considering it, just know that there are a lot of other people considering it too.
Okay.
And so, if you're going to decide to jump in, it's a good skill to have. And there's lots of businesses that are incorporating their drone guy into the business, right, making them a regular W-2 employee.
Okay.
And there's still a lot of space out there for different niches within. I call it the drone industry, but that's um, it's kind of
There's lots of different applications.
there's lots of different applications. So, um, it just it depends.
Okay. What about 3D printing? Since that's another aspect of your interest, is there societies or websites or podcasts for that? For
Yes, yeah, for sure. There's there's lots of YouTube channels, and that was a great education tool for me. Was a lot of those guys, because it's so new and interesting, they'll post a lot about it online, um, and kind of do some free education type stuff on YouTube.
Okay.
A lot of those have been really helpful for some bigger manufacturers who have like 1,000 3D printers in their warehouse. Um, yeah,
Okay. Yeah. I always say you can learn anything on YouTube now. Like,
absolutely. Yeah,
I'm working on learning some coding languages.
nice.
YouTube is the best way for me, the best way I've found, because they demonstrate it right in front of your face. Right.
Yeah,
It's such a useful tool.
yeah,
Yeah. That's awesome.
yeah. That is something uh, I wish I knew more about, and I can foresee myself in the future learning a programming language, especially in the realm of like robotics,
Okay.
because as a mechanical engineer, it's like you can design the physical thing and make sure that it's strong enough to withstand the physical stuff that's happening, but then all of your actuators are normally going to be an electric motor.
Hmm.
And so that's normally the cutoff between mechanical and electrical engineering. You give your requirements to an electrical engineer, and then they're like, oh, well, here's the motor size and here's the wire size, and that's controlled by a board of some sort.
Yeah.
And then that's where you get the robotics type people in there, the more computer programming type stuff. And so I've going through doing the drone project in college, I learned enough about the electric motor sizing to kind of work my way around. But at the end of the day, you need some sort of programmable controller to actuate that motor, and that's just a big cloud with a bunch of question marks for me.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so for any project around the house, like I know I can design the physical thing, but how do I control it? I don't know.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that is a valuable skill. And one of my top performing peer at LSU, was a really great guy. He was homeschooled. And he beat everybody by miles, in terms of GPA and performance in every class. It was pretty wild, but he learned programming, learned how to, I don't know the different languages he knows, but he's good at it.
That's cool. Yeah, and it's good to hear from a mechanical engineer that where the segregation of the different disciplines lands, because the level of expertise is always, it kind of gets you kind of get siloed a little bit whenever you go to college into a specific area, but it shows the value of having a diversity of different types of engineers in the world. You did a really good job. I appreciate the robot analogy. That's a good one. Yeah. Because you need the electrical engineer to build the motor, but then you need the computer scientists to write the program.
Exactly.
And so that everybody's got their role in that in that process of building those different things. So, well, I think we've covered quite a bit. I appreciate you coming along. Do you have any other, as a Central High School graduate, right? Do you have any
2017?
There you go. Do you have any other messages that you'd like to send to students about being in the real world, being out in the actual trying to get a paycheck kind of job?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to do a dollar sign analysis or a dollar sign guidance. So more money, less money. If you want to make more money, then it's got to be a more restrictive, a harder thing to get into, a harder skill to learn. More dangerous normally makes more money, so there's different things that move you up on the ladder or down on the ladder. And I know a lot of people say just, pursue your passion, but passions are actually really moldable. And within one given desire or passion that you have, there's a whole range of things that could be lived out in. And so if you're within something that you think you're gifted for, and that's another money thing. If you're gifted at a particular skill set. So for me, it would be more mechanically minded, being able to visualize 3D objects in my head, move them around and put them together, take them apart, change the shape. And then the math and the physics side as well. So that's kind of my giftings. And so so within your giftings, and then you just pick your range of risk and difficulty to get into, and those different factors of like, okay, well, how much do I want to make and what do I want to do? And so for me, I picked high risk in the sense of my own business. It'll be even better eventually. I know that it'll scale more eventually, but a lot of my peers who just went to the plants as a mechanical engineer, the starting salary for a mechanical engineer at a plant is normally like $100K at a minimum. And so, it's hard to look at that and be like, well, but I get a lot more freedom. Hours are really great, and a lot of interaction with family. Yeah. And that's, I said I don't know what I would trade it for, but it's really awesome.
Yeah.
It's really, really awesome. So there's just reflect, take a step back and think about what your giftings are, not just based on the classes that you're in, because now there's 30 people with the same approximate giftings as you, but take a step back and think, what am I good at? What do I want to do? And how much money do I want to make based on the losses that you take to family life and risk to your own life, survivability as you go towards the top, and choose what you want,
what you're comfortable with, right?
what you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, what makes you happy in that range of both danger and difficulty,
Yeah.
right? Do you want to do an easy job and come home and not be stressed, or do you want to do the more difficult thing because that makes you feel fulfilled?
Yep.
More. Yeah, I did the difficult thing. You know.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's great advice. Thanks
Yeah.
again, Joe,
Yeah.
for coming. This has been Wildcat Career Chat. I'm David Bennett, reminding you to find your passion and build your future.